Okay, so in this video we're going to be checking the kingpins in the front axle. Best way to do this is to put the vehicle in the air, of course on your support stands like you should, your jack stands. You want enough room for your big pry bar to come up directly underneath the bottom of the tire, and you're going to pry up. That thumping noise you can hear, if you were doing this here in person, you'd be able to feel it too. You can feel the tire assembly moving up and down. Okay, so there's a specification for that as to how much movement it can have vertically, which is up and down, and laterally, which is in and out. So pretty much the rule of thumb, if you can feel it and hear it moving, you're going to be outside your specifications. I'm not going to tell you what the spec is because I want you to look that up in the service manual. And it is under steering, under the axle for this 2000 Freightliner. So it's a little bit crazy to find. You just have to hunt around for it, and then you can find the front axle, the specifications, and it will give you the Kingpin clearance. I'm going to go out and explain some more things about a Kingpin on a vehicle we can see a little bit better. That Freightliner has a lot of stuff on the front of it covered up, and it's really hard to see. This will be a better illustration here. So we're on the rolling, well, the Factory Thread International outside. I know the lighting is horrible, but just remember on the Kingpin travels through the entire axle. It's fixed once it's installed in the axle itself, and the Kingpin does not rotate. It's just a long, round, hardened metal pin. The upper and lower steering knuckles have bushings installed in those, and they're installed and then reamed to fit. And between the axle and the lower knuckle, you have a bearing that actually supports the weight of the vehicle. It's like a turntable. The weight of the truck pushing down on the axle, it's pushing down on this lower knuckle. The tire is holding it up, so you have a roller bearing inside here that is supporting the weight of the vehicle. There's nothing really in between the upper and lower here. There are shims that go in this. When you set this all up, replacing it, you do some measurements and you get the proper shim pack in there, because there's a specification on how much clearance this can have. So if it has vertical, which is normally what you find, this roller bearing in here is wore out, and you got to get that fixed before it dishes out the knuckle or the axle, because it's, like I said, a turntable on that. Okay. Lateral movement would be the bushings being bad and the steering knuckle moving in and out, but normally you're going to have the up and down, which is what the truck we just checked inside has. Okay, if you take one of these apart, remember that it has two draw keys. So there's a key that comes from this side and sticks out the front through the axle and holds the Kingpin in place. There's another one that comes through from the other way, so they wedge the Kingpin to keep it from turning. It'll just be round like this on one end because it's a wedge. The other end will have threads and a nut that you tighten down, so one goes one direction, one goes the other. You have to remove both of those to get this apart. Okay, now sometimes you're doing this by yourself, so it's hard to tell exactly what is wrong, because remember, you could have a wheel bearing loose that's giving you that same type of movement. So if you had a bad wheel bearing, it may feel like a Kingpin. Okay. One way to check that, if you have help, that you could have somebody pry the wheel up and down. You can get under the vehicle and see where the movement's at. If you see movement between the knuckle and the axle, then you know it's the Kingpin assembly that needs to be serviced. If there's no movement there, but you see the wheel is moving up and down, then you know it's the wheel bearing. If you're doing this by yourself and don't have any help, you can check it and feel the movement, and then to verify that it's the Kingpin and not the wheel bearing, you can use a brake holding tool, which wedges the brake down toward the floor, and this comes back against the seat and it locks and it keeps the brakes applied for you. Of course, on this truck you'd have to air the air system up to have air for the brakes, but you would do a full brake application, use this bar to hold it, and then pry it and see if you have the same movement. Okay. If the movement goes away when you apply the brakes, then it's the wheel bearing. And what happens is the brake shoes actually come out and grab the drum, which is attached to the hub, and lock it basically to the spider on the axle, and it takes the wheel bearing component out. So if the movement goes away with the brakes applied, it's a wheel bearing. If the movement's still there with the brakes applied, then it's the Kingpin. So that's just kind of a little trick of the trade where if you're diagnosing this by yourself.